Hey everyone, welcome to SolSeed Podcast. We are super delighted and honored to have Rara with us today. Hey Rara.
Hey, Winnie.
And we're going to start right off with Rara leading us in a little meditation, breathwork, prayer moment to bring us all into a sweet space together. So turning it over to you, Rara. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're
So
welcome. Thanks
great.
for having me.
And thanks
Yeah.
for starting us in this way.
Yeah, of
Feels really,
course.
really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just doing this before we started recording to drop in and so I was like, hey, that was so yummy. Let's do it again and share it with you guys. So just inviting you to find, if you're not already comfortable, just maybe getting a little bit more comfortable. Inviting you to close your eyes and just feel your body. Just notice how it feels to be you. And notice your breath. Notice that you're breathing. And you don't even have to change your breath too much. It's just that act, that simple act of becoming aware of your breath. It's such a powerful moment. And as you do that and you perhaps notice the breath naturally start to deepen, just inviting a gentle body scan. Perhaps starting at the top of the head and just coming down to the forehead and softening there. Softening the eyes and the muscles behind the eyes. Softening down the cheeks and the jaw and the tongue. Softening the ears and the muscles inside the ears so that you can really hear life. Just listening to this eternal present moment. And as you continue to soften down the throat, just inviting the breath into the heart space a little bit. So taking some focused breaths with the chest into the center of the lungs. And on the exhale, just letting anything else go that needs to be released. A couple more breaths like that. And then just acknowledging gravity, letting the awareness of this soft and gentle pull down towards the earth. Letting that tune your attention down to your belly. Perhaps taking a breath into a soft belly. And as you exhale, just relaxing the hips a little bit. And so continuing to feel the body, feeling awareness in the body, acknowledging that the earth is holding you, that you have this beautiful sky energy above you. And then just feeling into all of your relations, the relational field with nature, with the people in your world. Just feeling the interconnectedness of life. And as you feel that interconnectedness coming back to the heart and just getting in touch with your essential goodness, just you, the goodness of you, nothing that has to change or be fixed. Feeling your kindness and your compassion and the way you give your gifts in the world, and how that, again, connects you with everything. And then just to bring our voices into the space, we're just going to take one nice deep breath in and sigh the voice out. So take a breath all the way in. Sigh it out.
Ah.
And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back into the space.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So good.
Yeah.
I got a double dose.
All right. Nice.
Sinking deep.
Yeah, love it.
All right. Well, speaking to you all out there in video land, I got to meet Rara a few Sundays ago at an amazing event we had here in Pisac, where we heard about Liquid Bloom was playing. And we didn't really know a surprise that was waiting for us after Liquid Bloom played, which was Rara. Incredible musician, amazing. Would you say DJ? I mean, your musician DJ combo. And so then he came into SolSeed Cafe not too long after that. And I was like, would you want to be on a podcast? And he delightfully agreed. So we're so grateful. And obviously breath work and meditation work, part of your path. So we'll get into that some too, because I saw today you have some free sessions online.
I do, yeah.
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yep, every week.
Okay, that's so wonderful. I might sign up if
Yeah,
they can
great. Yeah.
commit.
Yeah.
But how beautiful of how you weave everything together. So to come to find out that he and Amani, the man who is known as Liquid Bloom now, had collaborated for 15 years.
Roughly about that, yeah.
About 15 years. And some of y'all might have heard of Desert Dwellers. There's plenty to find on Spotify and SoundCloud. Beautiful music, sort of soundscape. I guess doing a lot for yoga and breath work. And so Rara has brought his musical talent and sensitivity really out into the world in that way, and has done other really cool things too. So today I want to just explore with him what the path has looked like that brought him to where he is today. And first, I'm curious as to the name Rara. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good story, and it has a backstory. So
Nice.
I could maybe do a quick roots, because I think it's an important part of the journey. But if it's told out of context, it doesn't quite
wait.
land.
Yeah. That's totally fine.
And
We'll get there.
We'll get there, but we can get there pretty quick.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, you're from Vancouver Island, is that correct?
Originally, I'm from England.
Oh.
Yep, I was born there, but we left when I was 6 weeks old, and we moved to a not so well-known part of Canada called Newfoundland.
Okay.
Which is the furthest eastern province. It's actually a half hour later than the eastern seaboard. It's an island in the North Atlantic, and we were not supposed to stay for long, but we stayed for 15 years. My dad had a job as a veterinary surgeon there, and it's a very unique insular island culture, maritime culture, called Newfies, Newfoundlanders, and it's very cold, long winters. But as a kid, I loved that. It was great. Lots of snow forts and snowball fights. But we were totally outsiders. We were like vegetarian, very well-educated British people. My parents were hippies. Like, we just didn't really fit in Newfoundland.
Okay.
So we moved to Victoria, BC when I was a teenager, and we very much fit in there. It was a very different culture, much more open-minded and liberal, and vegetarianism was cool. And that's where things kind of started for me. That's where it kind of feels like the rubber hit the road.
When were you born?
1976.
Okay.
I'll be 50 this year.
Okay, so your parents were
They were
there
in
1970s.
Yeah, they hung out. My mom hung out with the Rolling Stones. My parents, Pink Floyd played their graduation party at college before they were well known. They were close to Hendrix. Like there was a lot of it because it was kind of a small scene back then. It wasn't this like huge global thing.
Okay.
In the years leading up to the big revolution, it was quite intimate around London and Cambridge and those kinds of areas. So their record collection's insane. I mean, that's partly why I do what I do, because I grew up on a steady diet of epic music and parents that really valued creativity and that kind of, inspired Renaissance culture.
Beautiful. So did you have a specific spiritual tradition that was a part of it,
No.
or sort of more the like hippie spirituality, new age that was coming into being?
That was actually maybe a trickier part in my family, was that spirituality was a little confusing. My mom was kind of Anglican loosely, and my dad was very kind of agnostic in a way, atheistic, I suppose you could say, very much into science.
Okay.
And that was a difficult thing to grow up in my family. There was a lot of sort of faith-based disagreements at the dinner table and not a strong sense of faith, even though music was kind of venerated as this spiritual experience. I got a lot of that. But when it came time for me to start defining my faith outside of just music, I hit a lot of walls in my family and had to kind of go on my own journey and figure that out, and come back way later in life and create some amends around what felt like a pretty challenging experience actually is growing up. So in a way, I mean, I think that's the thing about life, is the suffering drives us to figure out who we are and what we're all about.
Yeah, the challenges bring so much.
Yeah, totally.
In the
Yeah.
moment, we're like, ah. But
Yeah.
yeah, they bring. Are you an only child? Do you have
No,
siblings?
I have an older sister and a younger sister.
And are your parents still alive?
They are, yeah. They live in Victoria. My whole family, my blood family lives in Victoria. Both my sisters have kids. And
So you're the middle boy.
yep, I'm the middle boy.
I'm the middle girl
Yeah. Yeah.
between two
So
boys.
yeah,
It's a thing,
the
right?
middle thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's a tricky.
We'll keep it. We'll
Yeah.
claim it. Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you moved to Victoria, found a little bit more of acceptance.
Yeah, more
How did it
tribe.
feel growing up where your family was the weirdos, kind of?
Yeah.
Did that affect you a little bit and as part of your challenge?
Yeah, Newfoundland was a funny mix of blessings and challenges. I had to really become somebody very different in order to just survive there. There was a lot of bullying, it's a sort of it's a type of racism there that is very pervasive when you're not from there. At first, you're met with some warmth and cordiality, but when you live there and it's your social life all the time, it becomes a source of judgment, humiliation, especially the vegetarian thing that really didn't understand
Yeah.
why you wouldn't eat meat. And so that became a source of a lot of feeling like I was an outcast and having to kind of deal with this hyper obsession about this choice that wasn't even my choice about eating, which actually drove me to eat meat later in my life because I just wanted to belong. And at the same time, Newfies are hilarious. They have a deep sense of humor and a profoundly warm sense of hospitality and a strong faith, I would say. It's very Christian, Protestant. And so there's some dark sides to that, but also a lot of warmth in their love of the Christian faith. And so I kind of extracted both of those things growing up in Newfoundland. And, even though by the time we got to Victoria, I felt more at home, there was still some gifts that I got to keep mining from my youth in Newfoundland that have always helped me, I think, feel a certain uniqueness to my upbringing that is almost hard to describe until you meet Newfies and see what they're about. In a lot of ways, they're kind of like the Peruvians here. They're just small town folk. They're simple, right? They're indigenous to the place that they come from. And for white people, that's rare. So Newfies have this kind of unique culture that's all their own. And for good and bad, you kind of soak it all up. And so I have a funny sense of humor because of the Newfies. And I also had to survive by being different than what I was really, born to be. And so I couldn't be that there. And that's why leaving was helpful for me creatively, because is a hard mold to break out of. Not a lot of people do there. Most people leave if they want to change themselves, you know.
Like many small
Yeah.
towns and little embedded culture that has kind of survived through tradition
Mm-hmm.
and through having their own sense of things. So somebody coming from outside, bringing these different ideas, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, wait a
Mm-hmm.
minute.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is too, just from my own personal experience of having a moment of not fitting in, was it helped me develop some more strength within me
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, which I would say
Mm-hmm.
it feels like what you have a lot of. It's just sort of a core strength in terms of walking your path
Mm-hmm.
and how sometimes coming into these places where we don't fit in can actually give us a little more internal center, maybe, or something like that. Do you?
Absolutely. I think especially if you get to the point where you can forgive the circumstances, have compassion for it, not be in reaction to it as a way of defining yourself, but to sort of find that middle path of like, okay, this acceptance, that's what happened. And sure, it could have been different or more ideal in certain ways, right? We all have these things, but yeah, it certainly taught me an inner resilience and an inner fortitude that I feel like I cultivated as I went. You know, because actually, I didn't spend too long in Victoria. I went to music school up there, and as soon as I got out of music school, I went to LA, and that was another place where I had to become very inwardly strong and know myself because it throws you around in a very different way than a small traditional town does. It's this huge machine of a city that will grind you up if you don't know who you are. And so, you know, that's when I started to draw on my Newfie roots quite deeply there. You know?
Brilliant.
Yeah, totally.
That's so brilliant.
Yeah.
Do you ever go back to Newfoundland or?
I haven't been back since I was 19, actually.
Okay.
I miss it. I miss it. It's so far out of the way. And not that it really matters, but it's an expensive plane ticket to get there. And so it's just enough barriers. And because the spring and summer are so short, there's not a lot of times where it's really great to go. And yet, yeah, I've been yearning and I hope to go back again soon. That would be really, really lovely.
So you finished high school in Victoria and you went to music school right out of high school?
I took a year off. I was totally lost. My mom was actually the one who suggested I go to music school. And so I spent 3.5 years studying jazz and classical and ethnic music. And that was some of the best years of my life. I was super content. It was a small town north of Victoria, a university college, where they didn't have a degree program per se, but you could just stay longer and take like degree level courses over time. Even though you just graduate with a diploma, it was more of the juice was the teachers. They were amazing. And so you just spend lots of time around them. They had open office hours where you could just go hang out with them and study privately. And it's a very comprehensive course when you get into jazz. Jazz is really deep theoretically and performance wise, and the history of jazz is really amazing. And you study all of that and in detail. And you come out with this incredible brain full of music. And in a way, you kind of forget the intuitive part of music because you're so full of the thinking
Technical.
about music piece. And so that's where I actually transitioned to electronic music and kind of went back into more of a practice of what's intuitive music again, now that I've learned all this stuff about it and how do those things bridge. And LA was a really great place to do that. Now, getting there, like the whole story of this is kind of where the rah-rah thing emerges,
Great.
is Victoria was both a blessing and also a very challenging place for me where I experienced pretty extreme trauma in a short series of very traumatic events that happened in my life that changed me fundamentally. One was my closest friend's father committed suicide in a very violent way. We were quite close. It was intense. It was the first time I'd felt that much pain from someone else that I couldn't understand why they could do something like that, you know. A year later, I was in a severe car accident where my intestines burst and I nearly died. I almost broke my neck. It was super intense. And then a few years later, I was in a really violent encounter with a close friend of mine where he had a bit of a a break over a jealousy issue, and he nearly beat me to death. And there was like, this was all pretty close in time. And it was sort of this huge initiation into pain and suffering. And I had to leave Alex behind. I had to like depart from that.
And this was while you were in music school or right after?
The first two happened before, and that's where I was a bit lost because the car accident happened in my last year at high school.
Oof.
And so I was physically kind of disabled. You know, I had to learn how to eat again and just like learn how to live. And I couldn't really do all the things my friends were doing at the time. And thankfully, again, my parents, my mom particularly, were like, maybe some focused time doing creativity would help. So went to music school, had a great time, came out, went through this third really intense trauma. Thankfully, at that moment, a lot of musicians from the LA underground electronic music scene were coming up to Vancouver Island and throwing these epic raves that were like legendary, you know, and it was like tribal because it wasn't just the DJs, it was a collective of DJs known as Moon Tribe, but it was like 40 of their friends who were also hardcore committed organizers and dancers. And it was a very ritualized kind of, I hate to use the word shamanic, but
Yeah.
it was like an indigenous dance ritual, but our style of indigeneity. So big sound systems, psychedelics, prayer, all about the music. You know, one DJ leading into the next all the way through till sunrise across the evening. But this was being done in the rainforest in BC. So that was part of this amazing thing that was happening was the LA people had discovered BC and they were like, this place is amazing. And they were bringing this raw energy from Southern California that was partly influenced by the Bay Area rave scene at the time, which was, you know, influenced by the London rave scene. And so there was this amazing kinetic energy that was igniting in BC. And I found my way into it and jumped on the bus. I literally left. I fell in love with a DJ. Here's the rah-rah part, which was...
What years are these?
This is
happening?
1999.
99.
Yeah. So I was fresh out of music school, pretty broken, traumatized, not really sure what to do. And I met this DJ named Roman. And at the time, I was a very heterosexual person. I had no concept of falling in love with a man. But when I met him, his music touched me in a way that I'd never experienced before. He was playing slow music. It was sexy. It was just like, and he stood out. He was a phenomenal DJ. And he could do things with music that I just never experienced before. And so I felt my heart open to him. And I was like, really? Like, really? That's not my thing. But because I was so broken, he was like my protector. He just kind of showed up and saw me, not for the broken version I was, but he really saw me. And so we fell in love. And he nicknamed me Rara. At first, he nicknamed me Mr. Amazing because he saw I was really hurting. And he introduced me to all these amazing people from LA as Mr. Amazing, you know. And so he's like picking me up and dusting me off and reminding me that I'm okay just the way I am. And at a certain point, Mr. Amazing was a little much, you know. It's like everybody called me that all the time. And I was like, okay, it's good, but, you know, maybe we can tone it down a little bit, you know, like. And so I picked up a thesaurus one day and looked at the word amazing, and Rara Avis is a Latin phrase for amazing. It means a rare or unique person, place, or thing. Actually translates as rare bird. And
Rara
Avis.
Avis.
Yeah. And so, and Roman and I were still in Victoria at the time. He'd actually moved from LA to Victoria. And he looked at me and he's like, Rara. And I was like, yeah. And so there it was. And at that point, I kind of stopped being Alex and left that identity behind and went on tour with Roman and kind of never looked back. I didn't really want to look back. I was too scared of what had happened. And so I moved to the States and became not a completely different person, but a different version of myself for quite a while. And that's where Amani and I connected. I also connected with this incredible producer named Craig Coland, who's now Sahuna of Shaman's Dream. And we all cross-pollinated our music so deeply, Amani, Sahuna, myself, that Shaman's Dream, Desert Dwellers, Liquid Bloom, Rara Avis, it was all this sort of intense soup of creativity. And we all had our own healing path that we were really deeply committed to, and music was right at the center of that. So once we found each other, we just fell so deeply into a creative love space with music.
And Roman was part of that too.
You know, Roman was an interesting ingredient in that he was an incredible DJ, and he tried to make a pivot into producing music, and he couldn't quite find his path. We were together maybe a year and a half, and then I sort of came back to a place of like, actually, I'm not really oriented towards men. This was like a real interesting phase for me, a healing phase. But I'm kind of feeling the call to return to sort of like who I feel like I am sexually. And so at that point, it was interesting how his music started to kind of fade for him as we were separating. Not that they were particularly tied together, but it was just sort of a cycle for him as well. And he ended up kind of quitting music and becoming a comedian.
Oh,
Yeah. I've never met anybody who like left music behind, you know? But I can see how for him, humor was something really deep for him. And that was a part of our bond, was we had this hilarious sense of humor together. And when he really realized that that's where he wanted to create and innovate, I think another part of him emerged. And he ended up leaving LA and moving to New York and pursuing a career in comedy.
well, good for him.
Yeah, totally.
You know, that's
Yeah.
a hard one, I would
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
That
Takes a
path
lot of courage.
doing the comedic.
Yeah.
So you had started working with electronic music in Victoria a little bit.
A little bit right after music school.
Uh-huh.
And even though at music school, electronic music was as close to outlawed as you could imagine.
I
Like
would
for
think.
jazzers, electronic music was like for music for people who don't know how to make music, you know. But amazingly, my older sister, right as I was graduating, handed me an Underworld CD. They were kind of a live electronic music act in the late 90s. It's
Okay.
called Second Toughest of the Infants. And I heard this music and I was like, oh, this is where it's going. Like, you know, all my teachers were kind of playing pizzerias and little cafes, and they were all jaded because there was no work for them, you know.
Yeah.
And I knew in my heart that electronic music was it. So I did spend a year after college in Victoria, kind of just beginning to produce at a very basic level, and just sort of understanding how computers and music worked together. I got exposed to a little bit of that in college, but this was like very early days where we were still using cassette tape recorders to pair with computers in order to make them something that you could actually record to and stuff. So it was right on the edge of the digital. But that's when, again, once the Moon Tribe sound came to Victoria and I heard what they were doing, I just wanted to get further into that and ended up spending a lot of time with the DJs of Moon Tribe in the studio with them, watching them produce and make the music that would end up getting pressed to vinyl and played on the dance floor. So it was a really great like post-grad kind of improv study in how to make all this stuff that was really banging for the dance floor.
And you were in your 20s, mid-20s kind of. How fortunate.
Yeah, it was super fortunate.
And how beautiful that jazz was kind of a foundation, you know, and in some ways, jazz being a music that grew out of a scene like that. I don't, you know, my sense of jazz just being from Atlanta, Georgia,
Yeah,
in the
sure.
South,
All right, okay. You know all
going to
about
New
it.
Orleans
Yeah.
regularly and getting
Yeah.
to
Wow.
just sink into that level of expression
Yeah.
and kind of how the electronic scene grew out of this new voice, this new place, kind of the same as jazz in certain ways. I guess any genre probably, but how it was a West Coast thing,
Yeah.
and how the jazz was a Southeastern thing responding to that culture, and this responding to the culture out there.
Yeah, and there's a lovely path to trace. You know, I mean, when we first started studying jazz history, we started in Africa before the slave trade, right? And so we're studying polyrhythms and drumming and cultures that danced a lot and had this really kind of tribal feel to them. And then comes this horrific kind of Holocaust-like experience that took so many people away from their roots. And the only thing that survived was call and response singing in the cotton fields. And that's actually how the slave masters knew where the slaves were, was they let them call out a line and sing it back. Otherwise, they would have outlawed music entirely. And so this like tiny little thread of the culture somehow managed to survive. And that became spiritualsies, which became early blues, which became jazz in the 30s and 40s, which then turned into a whole revolution of essentially African American people trying to make music that excluded white people because it was so complex and drawing on their deep polyrhythmic roots, things that white people had a hard time feeling and understanding. But then as the culture started to kind of blend together again in the 50s and 60s, that's when things started to merge back in, where you start to see the kind of early arrival of funk and the precursor to essentially house music, disco, all that stuff, you know. And then to see the way technology came in and created this drum sound that was like insatiable, kind of brought it back to its original roots, you know. And so a lot of to me, the dance floor culture is very honoring of the old tradition of where it really came from, but giving a lot of us who didn't have those deep African roots access to this kind of pulse of essentially black music that gets you in your body right away, gets you out of your head. You know, not to say that white music or classical music or anything is good or bad. I love it. It's beautiful, but it's very intellectual in a lot of ways. It's not, doesn't always like take you down and in the way bass and drums do.
Absolutely agree. I'm a dancer.
Right on.
A vocalist here and there and with groups occasionally, but mostly as a young girl, I started collecting 45s. I was born in 65.
Sweet.
So
All right.
I'm 60 this year.
Yeah, cool.
And I had my collection of 45s that were mostly like Earth, Wind, and Fire, Ohio Players. And I would just put those on, come home from school, which was rough for me, and put on my 45s and just dance so hard, you know, just shaking off the school vibe and all the things. And so, yeah, I've always kind of been, I would call it Afrocentric in my taste. So wonderful to where we've gone now with the electronic music and what, for example, you and Armani are producing, because it can really take us there. And how great to have that, you know. I mean, I could dance to rock and roll too.
Sure.
I love my rock and roll years as well, like your parents.
Me too. Oh yeah,
I had those moments of Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin was my first rock and roll concert in Brussels, Belgium, actually. But yeah, just how beautiful. And those really were imitating the Black artists, especially the blues, you know. I worked at Sun Studio for a moment in Memphis, Tennessee.
Sure.
Sam Phillips, who was a genius producer, and just took the Black, he opened it because there was no place for blues artists to record in the South.
Right.
They had to go to Chicago.
Right.
And then here comes the blues, and then here comes, you know, Elvis and Roy Orbison and all kinds of other amazing people. And he just brought it all together. So really, like, so much of the foundation outside of classical and Celtic and these other, but certainly the foundation of what we all love is Africa. And how this challenge, this horrible, like you said, basically genocide, or this horrible aspect of our history, did bring the music and create so much joy and beauty for people at the same time through that.
Yeah, that's always the thing about suffering, right? There's this double side to it. It's tragic, and it usually has a blessing. You know, it's one of the harder things about life to really accept. But in that acceptance, I think that's how we get to the good stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Loving acceptance.
Yeah.
And then find what we can, dig the gold out of it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're moved to LA. You're in this amazing scene that's being pioneered.
Yeah.
Really. You're like on the front edge of what exploded.
Hmm.
And so tell me how that worked and what it felt like, and
Yeah.
as you kept producing, and how long that lasted. And
Yeah, great. So there's one more thread to tie in, which is that as soon as in my third year classical theory class, I had this brilliant, genius composer who turned me on to something called harmonic overtones. And we had to study the overtones series in classical theory because it's actually the guidebook for harmony, melody, rhythm, chords. And it turns out to be this very esoteric, fundamental structure of the universe. It's quite amazing. It's a series of whole number proportions that you find in any vibrating anything. Like for example, a guitar string. Let's take that for example. When it's vibrating, the frequency of the string is defined by the length of it, right? And
okay,
that vibration creates the pitch that we hear, how
okay,
many times it's moving per second, etc. But inside that is another sound wave that's half as long and an octave higher, and that's the first overtone. And then there's one that's 3 times as fast, and that's the next overtone, and that's a fifth above the octave. And then there's 4 times as fast, and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, and it goes all the way to infinity. But the first 16 notes are what define music. And when I learned that, I was like, what the heck? And then he played a singer from New York called David Hikes who can sing these overtones. So he's singing a pitch, but he's resonating the overtones using his sinus cavities and his mouth. And you're hearing him create a scale over top of the fundamental. And my body was like, what is this? You know, it was so exciting. And so I would go to the bathroom in between class breaks and go, and try to make these sounds, right? So when I got out of college, I saw a poster one day advertising a harmonic overtone singing class. And I was like, I got to go. And so that ended up introducing me to what I would call my yoga teacher, like my yoga master, if you could say. He was the one offering this workshop. And he was right around the corner from me in Victoria. He had this little kind of urban ashram, and he was a sound healer. He'd spent 10 years in India studying Ayurveda. He went to Central America and studied like a Mayan form of yoga, went to Egypt and studied yoga there, and sound was at the middle of it all. So he was doing cancer therapy with amazing sound tables with bass waves built in, and he had all this really cool stuff, and he was really, really deep in it. And so I apprenticed with him, learned pranayama, I learned yoga, started writing music for cancer patients right away. And it was the thing that helped me start to address this pain from my abdomen. Was I immediately started learning how to sing to my belly and understanding what sound could do to help me heal. And so, and I'd been exposed to a little bit of that in college. I was starting to get into toning and stuff, but this guy David Goulet was like Yoda, you know, and he was so legit and so deep in it. So I apprenticed with him. I worked with cancer patients. I learned how to slow people's nervous systems down with sound, how to get them breathing more deeply. I was doing that to myself. And so when I got to LA, I had this whole other part of my life that was yoga. And it was from this really deep root of yoga where I learned yoga in a living room with a couple of people, with a teacher, getting all these direct transmissions from these old Ayurvedic yogis that my teacher had studied with. And it was all about sound. So at that time, the electronic music scene and the yoga scene were totally separate. Like no one who was going to raves was going to a yoga class, and very few people in the yoga scene were going to raves. They were kind of distinctly different. And you could say the self-care in the rave scene wasn't super high, but the psychedelia wasn't super high in yoga. It was a bit, especially in LA, it was westernized in a way.
okay,
Even though there were some great roots to the LA yoga scene, it was starting to be commodified. It was very different. So they hadn't quite found each other yet. And what happened for me was, again, the path was really quite clear because I was kind of coming from my own need for healing. That was the anchor for me. I somehow got invited into this incredible thing called Shaman's Dream that was like an ecstatic dance band for the yoga scene in LA. And sat in awe of this band for the first while. I remember how I got into it because I was jobless. I moved to LA with $100 and like no possessions. I got on a bus. I just showed up in LA and I was like, I need to survive. And these are my skills. I can sound engineer. I know how to set up music equipment. I didn't say anything about being a musician because I knew that wasn't a quick way to survive, right? Like that's not what you put out there.
Absolutely.
And because I'd had a job in Victoria volunteering as a sound engineer. So I was like, this is what I can do. And so I got invited to be a sound engineer for Shaman's Dream. Ironically, it came through the Moon Tribe community, which was kind of my family at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I show up to see this band and I meet Craig. And there's something about him that just kind of like made me stop. I just look at this guy, Craig Colin. He was the original founder of Shaman's Dream. He's now known as Sahuna. And you just meet a deep soul and you know it. You can tell when he says hello. I'm just like, well, this guy's operating on a different frequency than sort of the mainstream part of the world. And he shows me how he wants me to set up the band. And I set up the band and I watch this amazing thing happen where 10 musicians get together and improvise an hour and a half long ecstatic dance journey for all these super vibrant yogis. Drums, saxophone, flutes, singers. I find out that most of these musicians are world class, packing stadiums, playing like with A-list musicians. And they come off tour and they come and play for Shaman's Dream for $30 because it's where the juice really is. You know, it's like this like authenticity and this sense of community and ritual that people are really hungry for, you know. So I spent 8 months just being an engineer. I didn't mention anything about being a musician. I just watched with a lot of awe. And I went to Moon Tribe parties and played my guitar with the DJs and had these kind of, again, these two sort of separate worlds. But finally, at a party that wasn't necessarily, it was just part of the Shaman's Dream band, someone's birthday, I brought out my guitar and I played. And the band was like, what are you doing? Like, how is it that you're a musician and you haven't told us yet? You know, because everybody wanted into this band. This was like the band to be a part of. But I was pretty modest and pretty humble, and that won their hearts. And so I became the center of the band after that. And Craig and I started immediately producing music together and kind of creating this whole Shaman's Dream sound that worked with a lot of the artists in the band and started to work with ethnic musicians all over the world. And at that point, I brought money into that project because we started writing yoga music for instructional yoga teachers that needed like really good soundtracks for their videos. I know I'm going kind of all over with this story, but this is like where all this pollinated, right? We were in touch with a lot of yoga teachers that were starting to rise up and become quite well known, you know, sort of this upper echelon of the yoga teacher where they're starting to tour around the world and they're in demand and they're getting funded to make these amazing instructional videos at a really high production level. And we had a budget for each one to write music. And so we're getting commissioned to write all this music. And I'm like, hey, Amani, I need some help. He and I knew each other from the Moon Tribe scene. And I just knew he was a phenomenal musician. And I felt that he had this real deep spirit to him. I knew that we'd connected before on that. And so I brought him in. We started writing a ton of yoga music. Sahuna, aka Craig, Amani, and myself. And we developed this sound for where electronic underground and ethnic spiritual music kind of fuses together. And that was sort of the birth of Desert Dwellers. But it also influenced the Shaman's Dream sound and it influenced the Liquid Bloom sound because it was all kind of, as I said earlier, quite meshed together. And then we were just in demand as this like yoga music thing. And the yoga festivals started and we would go to the festivals and play live for a lot of the teachers that we'd scored music for already. And that's where kind of a lot of this notoriety kind of spun out of.
And that was mostly around LA still?
It was. We started to tour a little bit. The Shaman's Dream Ensemble was so big and kind of in a great way unruly, it was really hard to tour with it. But that's when Sahuna, myself, Amani started to kind of turn it into a studio sound, make it more portable, make it so that we could go out and play some shows with it. And yet, I think because we had such a cross-pollinated identity, there wasn't a singular brand that was emerging out of it that people could really identify with.
Mm.
And that was actually a challenge. And I remember friends of mine in the music industry at the time, they were like, you got to pick one and go with it because no one's going to know that you're all the same thing, you know? No one's going to understand that Shaman's Dream is Desert Dwellers, is Liquid Bloom, is Rara Avis. Like, it's hard for people to understand that. So you should just decide on one thing, right? And so that took some time. And ultimately, that's where Desert Dwellers kind of emerged.
Okay.
And at the time, for years, Trevor Walton, who's been a part of Desert Dwellers for a long time, was also collaborating with Amani. And that sort of like coagulated into Desert Dwellers as the touring entity. Was Trevor joined more regularly, started working with myself and Amani. And then just as it was peaking, I was like, oh, that's not the path for me. And it went off and got, super famous and did the thing. And I was, at the time, my trauma was catching up with me. I was dealing with drug addiction. I was dealing with major depression, anxiety. I had no idea how to take care of myself. And I just saw the road as like really dangerous for me. Every time I would go out and play, I would come back feeling pretty depleted. Like I just didn't know how to take care of myself. And I saw my ego as well was getting pretty big.
Losing the humility
Oh,
that
yeah.
had got you there.
Yeah, totally.
Really, which you see that a lot,
Yeah,
and it's fascinating to watch what becoming well known out in the world and the public world the effect it can have on folk for sure.
Yeah.
Some can handle it, and yeah. But how beautiful. So you started your spiritual path, you might say, with your yoga teacher and overtone information. And how incredible is that
It's
came
pretty
into
cool.
your realm?
Yeah.
This sort of esoteric teachings through the music. So that kind of held you, right? Or I guess gave you a little boost into, okay, here's coming from your parents who didn't have a lot there to give as a foundation, and so you found it, and then that took you to LA, where then you magically come into this amazing scene and help initiate, help create, help bring it out into the world. And then it gets to a point where you're like, okay, yeah, this isn't for me. So what happened after that? Where'd you go?
Yeah. So a couple years before that, again, Craig Sahuna and Amani and I started a company called Yogi Tunes. And the idea was that yoga teachers were sort of becoming these kind of music curators, and they were touring a lot. And there was a whole bunch of artists that were pivoting into the kind of conscious music space, where that meant that their music was getting played in yoga classes a lot. And it was sort of this ecosystem of artists, yoga teachers, and record labels that we'd met. And so we're like, well, why don't we start an online music service that helps provide yoga teachers with playlists for their classes and helps promote the artists. And so we did a startup, and it was my first time writing a business plan and raising money and getting into that whole world. And I was super comfy with technology. So was Amani. And so we birthed that, the three of us. And after a couple of years, it was pretty hard. It wasn't making money. It was right when the music industry was transitioning into file sharing and widely available music everywhere. And so the appeal of a niche music startup was hard to get money for, wasn't very profitable. And so Amani and Craig actually decided to go back to being full-time musicians right at the crux where I was realizing that the road wasn't for me. And so I decided to go the Yogi Tunes route and become CEO and be an entrepreneur. And it was actually kind of a welcome break for me. We'd written a lot of music, and I was out of touch with the source of it at that point. It was very formulaic. And because I was struggling with addiction and my ego, I just didn't know what the source of my creativity was anymore. That was kind of this like strange, what used to be very intuitive was now this sort of almost place of numbness and disconnection. And so the entrepreneurial path arrived for me, as I started to also embrace my need for healing. And that brought me to a hot springs retreat center in Northern California. I was invited to play there, called Harbin. And I got out of my car and I looked at this amazing piece of land that was quiet and very nourishing for my nervous system. And I was like, I need to stay here. And it was really clear. And so even though I came and went a few times, I ultimately moved there, and lived on the land there, met a wonderful woman, married.
How
When
old were you when you?
I was probably, let me just think, those years are a little on the hazy side, but I think I was about 31, 32 when I kind of landed at Harbin and rooted down for the first time ever. Like, even though I was in LA, it was a very chaotic environment, lots of craziness, lots of movement, lots of travel, and then a couple of years of being quite nomadic.
And a good amount of drugs in the scene at that time.
Yep.
So kind of the electronic scene coming in with the yogi scene and s- psychedelics or more.
Psychedelics, cannabis. I was a huge pot smoker. That was kind
Okay.
of my main piece. But I would say the yoga scene was pretty void of drugs, although some people maybe smoked weed, but it was more the electronic underground. Lots of ecstasy, lots of LSD. Later in the scene, when I wasn't as into it, GHB came along and kind of really hurt the scene quite intensely. You could see how some psychedelics were helpful to a degree, and then others were quite harmful. And, for a period of time, I was actually quite into advocating for healthy use of psychedelics and, trying to understand that. But then it all was also quite overwhelming, and I didn't really know how to care for myself. So I kind of had to go back to basics and really look at, like, how do I let go of all this sort of psychedelicness as an identity and start coming back to just like me, who I am without all of that. And that's where Harbin was really helpful. And I started to meet healers that could start to like help me understand what had happened. I'd been basically running, away from all the trauma and the
Yeah.
pain and numbing it out at any cost and not having any capacity to stop. And some very deep and powerful experiences with really tuned in healers at Harbin, where Harbin's kind of the birthplace of Watsu, which is a style of shiatsu in the water. So you're going into the water with amazing healers, and they're getting you into these sort of, in a way, prenatal states where you're like, you go into the fetal position, you're underwater, it's warm, like it's sort of this rebirthing practice in a way. And that's where I first started to untangle the pain in my stomach in a deeper way and take a look at my addictions and what I was running from and all of that. And that was really powerful. And this is where I met my then wife, Jumana, and she was a single mom. And she had this firefly of a kid who was 5 years old, this little dreadlock, blonde, crazy, feral kid that a lot of folks had trouble with. He was pretty wild as a kiddo. But I watched the way she was with him, and I was like, oh, there's something really there. She's really in tune with him. And so I started the parenting journey. And that took me to Ashland, Oregon, when we realized that Harbin wasn't a good place for kids.
Were you still doing yogi tunes? The whole
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I was, well, actually, no, even though the timelines, the way I've explained it, might feel a little crazy, I was still actually in Desert Dwellers while I was at Harbin.
Okay.
Now that I think about it.
Okay.
And Yogi Tunes didn't start until I kind of got to Ashland and realized that was the next step. So, yeah, maybe sort of rewriting a little bit of the narrative there. But
And how'd you get so comfortable with the technology with computers? Was that just something that came to you
as a kid? Yeah. I was 6 years old when my dad brought the first computer home, an Atari 800, and I started writing programs and playing video games like crazy. Amazingly, when I was 12 or 13, I took a very long break from digital screens, everything, because I was so addicted. I couldn't sleep. All I heard was like the sound of the video games and coding. And so I took an 8-year break from computers.
Wow. When you were 12, 13,
Yeah.
you knew that you needed to do that.
Yeah, self-imposed.
Wow,
I
that's
was just like,
incredible.
I didn't think it was going to be that long at first. I was just like, I'm done. But then it turned into a way of life, and I spent most of my teens out in nature. And then went back to computers in college because I found out you could make music with them. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. But then, of course, I got addicted to video games all over again. And had to go through that, journey. And addiction has been a wonderful teacher and a very difficult challenge for me my whole life. So I'm still very involved in addiction recovery, writing about addiction, teaching about it, and suffering from it all along. It's way less intense than it used to be. But,
Congratulations.
yeah,
I mean, I
thanks.
think it's all of us.
Yeah. Oh, we're all habituated in
Yeah.
coping in lots
Yeah.
of ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're designed to do that. So some of the greatest research I've done is into evolutionary biology and trying to understand how we adapted such strong habit forming capacity, why that works the way it does, why our nervous systems drift towards scarcity as a survival tactic. Like, there's a lot of really incredible architecture in there that's helped us survive, that creates the precursor
It
for
leans
addiction.
in that
Yeah,
direction.
especially when there's trauma,
Mm-hmm.
which is a inherited cultural fabric at this point that nobody escapes. So
Yeah.
you can see why we're so vulnerable to addiction as a species at this point.
Yeah.
And I think that's, it's been there all along for me, this intense suffering from trauma and then addiction, but it's always informed what I'm giving back to the world as far as music, learning how to teach meditation, breath work, learning how to parent, like even looking at parenting from a point of view of addiction and trauma and the cyclical way in which these things get handed down, these habits of parenting. Because when I got to Ashland, I actually met a whole group of guys that were dedicated to creating conscious parenting through rites of passage. And it was a whole other initiation that I took as a stepfather and started working with youth, and was very distant from music at that point, like barely touching it, totally focused on where the core wound is, which is in the family, and going in and helping families de-stress that core wound through nonviolent communication, teaching parents to be curious with kids instead of prescriptive, helping them address their own powerlessness as kids, doing that kind of regressive therapy work with them, doing that with their kids in the field so their kids can watch them like go through a process. And that was Ashland for me. That was a whole amazing chapter of.
Was that group called something?
It's
or
called
is it
Boys to Men of Southern Oregon.
Boys to Men of
Yeah.
Southern Oregon?
Yeah.
And the rites of passage, were they modeled after ancient rites that we
Yep.
know have happened in other cultures?
Yeah, in a way. So it was an adaptation, and it came from something called the Mankind Project.
Oh, I know Mankind.
Okay, so
I was a part of Woman Within.
okay, great. Yeah, so we had an Ashland chapter similar to Women Within called the Rose Circle.
Okay.
And Ashland was also where Bill Koth lived, who was one of the founders of the Mankind Project. So Ashland's kind of a hotbed for men who've been through the MKP training, and then women who are doing Rose Circle work. So MKP drew from rites of passage from indigenous cultures, but they also put it through their own cultural lens and
Yeah.
changed and filtered some of the things. But some of the core pieces are, as you mature through rites of passage, your identity gets stripped away and you're brought into some kind of container of, now, most of my experience is boys and men, so I can't comment on, while I've witnessed from an exterior what rites of passage for girls and women are. Culturally, there's such a difference of what boys and men are healing due to patriarchy and the violence that's occurred there. What's happening for boys and men is boys are learning to actually attune to the feminine in the men around them, and they're experiencing men that have a capacity to be nurturing and caring, but also strong and boundaried. And so they're interacting with a field that's different than the patriarchal kind of overtone of the broader culture, so that they can repair trust with the masculine, like what that really feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially right now, right? Like we're seeing this patriarchal modeling that's so destructive. The work that's being done in these places of reducing and healing and addressing intergenerational violence from men to boys is profoundly healing for the culture. And it's niche, right? Like it's not this huge revolution happening in men's work, I think. It's partly because what men need to do is learn how to be more humble. And so it's 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 funny. Maybe this is my own perspective, but I felt like women's empowerment was women needed to be seen and heard and stand up for themselves, and men need to learn how to soften and be a little smaller. And so it's not very visible work in a lot of ways. It's kind of this humble little place where we just do work with boys. And I found it we often found it quite difficult to commercialize it, grow it, financially find endorsement for it. Like it was this fragile little thing in a patriarchal culture, you know.
So back to your humility.
Yeah.
And so part of your healing, obviously, then going there, yeah, I feel like one of the things that's lacking well in this whole humanity is true humility, and how that can hold us in such precious ways that we don't realize. But we've been swimming in the water of pride and arrogance and competition and the thing, So yeah, the humble piece gets swept under the carpet a lot of
It
times.
does, because all the rest of that grabs the headlines, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really does.
Yeah. But when it comes to divinity and what's really continuing and what's really affecting, and what's being seen, then it's huge. Yeah, I lived at Earth Haven Eco Village
Okay.
outside Asheville, North Carolina,
Yeah,
or Black
sure.
Mountain, North Carolina, actually.
Right.
And they had the Mankind Project as a part of that there with the fellas, and they were doing the work too. And yeah, just a big shout out to all the brothers out there
Yeah.
that are doing this work. Yeah, when you're not seen and you still continue on, and how beautiful and how powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So glad that
Yeah.
you
Thank you.
got to experience that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Of course.
So that was part of the mentorship too that was going on.
Yeah. Some of the kids I still mentor to this day. I have this one kid. I love this story. He was 8 years old when I met him, and his dad was really, really struggling. And so I became this figure in his life. And a lot of times you look back and you don't even realize when you're having these moments of impact, where we would have weekends where he just would be so feeling completely out of sorts because of his relationship with his dad. And I would just come to him by the fire at night and just give him a hug and just sit with him. And we didn't have to do much. It was just my presence that was really comforting. And he grew up to become the U.S. parkour champion. And I fell out of touch with him for a few years. And I was going through Ashland playing a show, and he comes bouncing up out of nowhere with this huge grin on his face. And we have this amazing reconnect, and he tells me all about his life. And then he's like, dude, this is so much because you were there for me. I was like, boo, like so good. And again, I didn't try to fix him or like change him. I was just there with him and gave him some care. And now we have a very regular kind of ongoing mentorship where I'm teaching him entrepreneurship and how to really follow his dreams. He wants to start a parkour gym that's also a mentorship center. And so it's been a really lovely progression. And I don't have kids of my own, so this is where I get to. I thought I was going to be a dad 100%. I was committed. I wanted to have kids so bad. And yet Spirit didn't give me that. And I came so close, and it was really clear that that wasn't my path in different ways that were not mine to control, and I had to really surrender and grieve this desire to be dad, and then see how, like, in many other ways I've been able to be that for kids, and have a lot of really beautiful experiences as a result. And, one of the things I got introduced to in mentorship was also working with kids in the criminal system. We did a mentorship process with them. They would get recommended for 6 months of CBT training, like basically mindfulness training. The Oregon Justice Department was actually pretty open-minded. And so at the end of their 6 months, we would do a mentorship process with them for 3 hours, where we would sit with them and get curious about who they were, and then reflect back all the good we were seeing in them. And this was like their graduation from restorative justice. And it was amazing to see how over 10 years of doing it, the rate at which they would get reincarcerated dropped super rapidly. Now, there was some tricky parts to that, which was, again, bumping up against a system that was so broken and weird, it actually brought me back to when I was working with cancer patients. I bumped up against the death system and like how much energy and money is made off of people at the end of their lives. And I was in there helping people die well and creating a very different experience than the sort of huge industry of end of life care. It was the same when I started to interact with the prison system. It was like overwhelmingly strong and designed to keep people in it, right? Like the way the culture responds to criminals creates the worst parts of humanity to come out. And we're able to change that. It was just insane, you know? And so,
with a 3-hour
yeah,
mentorship, it just shows you just these,
doesn't take
we're
much.
just all craving
I
presence.
know. And to know that we're good just the
Yeah.
way we are, right?
Yeah.
We all make crazy mistakes. I've done stuff that would have put me away for years, but I had privilege,
Yeah.
right? And maybe a little bit of luck. And so that really affected me deeply, meeting
So
these kids.
incredible. Thanks for, again.
Yeah,
And the cancer, we kind of skipped over that right quick.
we
That
did.
was the yoga teacher.
Yeah.
And you were making music
Mm-hmm.
for cancer patients.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you go in
I'd go to their houses.
You'd go to their homes.
Yep. And I'd teach them how to breathe. And I'd bring singing bowls and I'd do overtone singing. And I'd set up like beautiful art. And I would just do on their body sound. I would sing onto their tumors. And usually I would help them die because they were like, it was a last ditch effort to do this kind of therapy. Like everything else had failed. And so they were open to doing some super esoteric, Ayurvedic, yogic, sound healy, cancer healy thing, you know?
So did you have people that transitioned while you were, that actually died?
Not in person, but
Okay.
as soon as I started working with them, if their body was ready to go,
They could
they
release.
could go.
So it was
Yeah.
basically help them release.
It's like hospice care, but kind of greasing the wheels for the body to just be like, I'm done fighting this thing. I want to just let go.
With music and breath work. And is that still happening? Do you know, I know the death doula has become sort of a thing.
Yeah, so our music, Amani, Craig, myself, gets used for that all the time. End of life. It also gets used for birthing. It gets used for making love to. It gets used for prayer work. It gets used for therapy, yoga, massage, meditation. Like it's just all in there in moments of transformation, creating the space for whatever wants to happen to happen. And that's where I learned a lot about what it means to be a healer. It's like I wasn't going to come in and magically heal this person's cancer. That wasn't in my capacity, but I could create a field of trust so that what wanted to happen could happen without all the fear and the resistance and the gripping and the holding on for dear life type thing. So
powerful. And when you were creating that music, was that during the time where you lost sight of what aspect of you is bringing the creativity in? And
not during the cancer years.
okay,
It
that
was
was early
later
on.
when I got to LA.
Yeah, that was
And
earlier on.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but now, still, the music you made in LA and then beyond
Yeah.
is for that purpose.
Yeah, and it was still super rooted in that.
Yeah.
I think it was, there was a period of time where I was a production coordinator for big budget hip hop music videos. So I was working in the industry in a very different part of it, spending $500,000 in 10 days to make someone famous and doing it like this machine. It would just like turn over fame like a product. And I got that sickened me in a certain way, watching that happen and being a part of it. I was doing it because it was really good money, but the ego in that part of the industry was really gnarly and dark. And what it did to the people, especially the ones that were younger, it turned them into these very unwell versions of themselves that the press would then descend on and consume. And then they just go on to the next one and the next one, the next one. Very few people could withstand that machine, And I think at that time something got kind of started to harden in me. of what I was seeing, because I was also seeing a lot of poverty in LA. We were shooting in parts of the city where people were dying, and people were kind of like these drugged out zombies that hadn't eaten in days. And here we are. So I'm spending $10,000 a minute making someone famous in a thing that's going to be forgotten the next week. You know, it was a really intense experience.
While you were also doing the desert
I would go from
dweller-
that to a yoga show, to go out in the desert and take psychedelics. And yeah, it was really a wild time.
Quite
And
a
that's where I started
tapestry.
to lose myself.
And you were in your 20s.
Yeah. And I was super damaged inside. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's where it became pretty swirly. And yeah, I kind of lost who I was in all of that.
Understandable.
Yeah.
So you get out, you go to Harbin, then you go to Ashland,
Yeah.
Mankind Project, mentorship,
Yeah.
the whole time doing music too. You had the yogi tunes going.
Yeah, I was doing, but I was pretty disconnected from my creative process. So the working as an entrepreneur in music was still keeping me in the music. And I was DJing a little bit. Ecstatic dance was starting to come out of the rave scene. And so I was becoming known for DJing in the ecstatic dance world. I wasn't writing at all. I was barely performing as a live musician. I was really just DJing a little bit. And at the time, it was kind of coming from Hawaii on the Big Island, where ecstatic dance was really bubbling up. And then ecstatic dance started migrated to the Oakland Bay Area. And that's where the ecstatic dance brand was kind of born as an open source brand. And so I got into that very early on. And that was my tie to music, was being CEO of this music company, networking with artists, and DJing ecstatic dance when I could. But also really enjoying being in this kind of rooted Ashland life where things were kind of getting a little bit more clear. But I was still really struggling with addiction in that phase. And it wasn't until my wife ended our marriage because of addiction that I finally stopped and learned how to get sober. And that was...
How old were you?
I was... Let me just think. It's probably 38, I would think. So it was like 20 years of being high pretty much all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, stopping wasn't even on the table. I was like, well, I could maybe stop until the afternoon. Like, I don't know how to get through a day without this. And anytime I would stop, it would just spiral into confusion and frustration and shame and all these things that were difficult.
Stuff that comes up that we block with the addiction.
Yeah, that's why
Once
you
the
keep going.
addiction, you don't want to like have to look at that
No,
stuff.
you don't
and
know
so,
how.
Yeah, you
Right?
don't know how.
Yeah,
We don't have the tools.
Yeah.
And it's been 20 years. And so,
Yeah,
you
and it's a very
know.
private thing, addiction, right? Like
Yeah.
addiction thrives on isolation
Yeah.
and shame. And so you're numbing, but you're also insulating yourself in this little world that no one sees.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife had seen it, and we tried to work through it. We did coaching for years and tried to work on it, but I'd never found any kind of sobriety community per se. And that's for me was key. And it was actually through 12-step. I went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, not being an alcoholic, but something told me to go there. Maybe it was always on my radar, but I walked through that door and some part of me relaxed. And I was like, oh, I'm around people that get it. They know what this is about and they have a way out. And I read the steps and I was like, that's pretty cool. Like the end is prayer and meditation and service. And on the way, you figure out what God means to you, and you don't have to explain it to anybody else or anything like that. And
Yeah, I've experienced 12 steps, and it's
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
definitely divinely gifted.
yeah,
It's so good.
yeah, there's some
Yeah.
good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and yet when I started talking about cannabis and sex and other things that I was struggling with, the alcoholics in the room didn't know what to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bucked against it and relapsed like so many times because I couldn't find a room where I could talk about it all.
Mm.
And that was a long journey of relapse until I finally learned how to be humble again and realized that it wasn't up to me to make 12-step the way I wanted it. That was my ego wanting to be in control. And I really realized that I needed other people. I couldn't get sober by myself. I thought I could. I thought I could be like this Olympic athlete of sobriety. But every time I tried to do it on my own, I would just find myself back in the same place. And so
And the humility coming around as we are powerless
Hmm.
on some level.
To control other people
Yeah.
and what they think about how AA is supposed to be run. Anything. I mean, there's
Control
so many.
anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many places where your control issues are. Once you're in a community, your control issues are clear because, well, if the container is built in a way that allows you to reflect on it, you get to see that your your entire concept of comfort is based on controlling people, places, circumstances, all of this, all the time. And that's what isolates you so much is you can't handle people anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what to do with them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because they make you feel uncomfortable and then you want to numb the discomfort right away. And so
Mm-hmm.
I learned to lean into the people that were triggering and find tolerance. And there's a lot of sobriety there, you know.
Within the 12
Yeah.
steps? Okay.
Yeah. Especially people who thought I might not belong
Yeah.
in a program
Yeah.
where, because I was, wanting to do it differently or whatever. That's always been with 12 step because I'm often wanting to do breath work and other things that aren't part of the 12 step culture. I've learned over time to not push back against this thing that actually works quite well, even though I've got my ideas about how I think it should work,
Yeah.
But that also led me to Buddhism and Buddhist recovery, where I found a lot of
The 12
solace.
steps led you to Buddhist recovery.
Yep, yep, absolutely. I went on a Buddhist recovery retreat that I'd sort of found through my journey of sobriety, and that was amazing to see how Buddhism and 12 step are very related, and there's some amazing bridges in there.
Mm.
And so, but all through that journey, I was still distant from music. I didn't find it until I moved back to Canada.
From Ashland.
Yep, because my marriage was done. I moved back in with my parents at like 40. I relapsed almost right away. I didn't know how to cope. All the trauma came back, all the things I was running from. And in that transition, I embraced Alex again. I'd been rah-rah the whole time. And coming back to Canada, it was actually right before I left. I was in a singing workshop and someone asked me to sing my name and I sang Alex. And everyone sang Alex back. And I was like, oh man, that's a part of me. That's like a really deep part. So I went home to reclaim that, and it took some time. But in that, I met a wonderful, wonderful woman named Naomi who I fell in love with, and we just are coming out of a 10-year partnership. And she introduced me to this amazing singing teacher named Amit, and he opened the door back up for me because it was about presence and mindfulness. It wasn't about performing. He'd been a rock star at the highest level, and the whole thing crumbled apart under ego. And he found his way into this really simple practice of softening the body, coming back to the breath, listening, and doing that more than the music. And so when the music becomes more important than the listening and the softening and the breathing, you stop doing music and you just return to this posture, this awareness. And then you sing these beautiful old desert melodies that don't have words. They're like Jewish niguns or old Sufi melodies. And
What's his background?
Jewish, Israeli, Hebrew, but he'd also studied with some Sufi stuff and had kind of a desert vibe to him.
So singing for divinity.
Yeah. And that's what cracked me back open to God fully. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, I'm home. And the music was really simple. It wasn't like this huge thing I had to take care of, like producing music and having an identity and all that. It was just this like sweet little practice that I could do anywhere, anytime. It took me a few years to kind of get back into it. I was still
At your parents' house still when this was
I
happening?
moved out, thankfully, pretty quick. My
Okay.
drug and alcohol counselor was like, get out of your parents' house. Like, your parents are great and all, but you need your own space.
Yeah, what does Ram Dass say?
Yeah.
Like, if you
If you
think
want
you're
to be
enlightened,
spiritual, go
go
hang
home.
with your family for a bit. Yeah, so that's just started a lovely chapter of homecoming where I could do some real sober work, certainly grounded back into 12-step when I got back to Canada and figured out how to be sober. Thankfully, my partner Naomi was very understanding and not shaming of me and really embraced that part of me with a lot of compassion and helped support me to go back to the 12-step world and kind of find myself again. So it was through a combo of that and this singing practice that really grounded me back into myself. And slowly I kind of emerged as a much more content, happy, peaceful, original version of myself. And it had a lot to do with making peace with all that trauma and being in the epicenter of it.
Yeah.
And understanding from all the things I'd done, the rites of passage work, the yoga work, all these things were elements of being able to integrate all of that trauma, which originally was family of origin stuff, which was ancestral stuff. And so I did ancestral work. I did that with indigenous people. I learned how to open up to my ancestors and see how the patterns repeat and forgive those people and work energetically with those people in real time and learn how to teach that to people of my culture who don't know what their ancestry is. And all of that what came from my homecoming of going back to BC and rooting down in this beautiful 10-year journey with Naomi and living close to the land there. But feeling strong enough to reemerge as a musician and have something to say, which is really different than, where I was long, long ago, which is that now I'm all about just teaching embodiment and presence. I teach a lot of breath work. I teach a lot of addiction recovery without it being called that. So everybody can relate to.
What do you call it?
I don't call it really anything. I just talk about what's going on in our nervous system, what's actually happening, and what are the strongest tools I've found in my journey to not only accept and make peace with that and be okay with where you are. Because ironically, changing addiction is harder when you're trying to change it. Like the moment you're against it, it strengthens and your body creates stress chemicals, which makes you want to go to comfort. That was the gift of AA, was the acceptance piece, right? Step one is all about acceptance. So almost always start with acceptance and coming home to this goodness inside, and then giving people very strong tools for nervous system regulation.
Breath work being meditation,
Breath work and sound, right?
Sound.
Yeah. Breathing and sounding, listening.
So those 10 years with Naomi, that was mostly, did you have an official music project or it was
I didn't. I was just teaching this way of singing and this way of being. And my external persona was pretty much non-existent. I didn't release any music. I was still ecstatic dance was a huge thing, and I was DJing a lot. But
in Canada?
Yeah, but I was mostly performing as Alex, and Rara Avis was super sleepy. And it's only on this trip coming down to Peru where Amani is just retired from Desert Dwellers. We haven't been together in 12 years. And he's like, Rara, come to Peru. And I'm like, it's the perfect time. I have a new company, which we might talk about, but I've been in LA for the last 3 years, building a new company, reconnecting with my LA roots. Amani opens up the door. It's the perfect time for me with my company. I come down here. We have this amazing reconnection. We're writing music again. We're playing music. We're living together like we used to. It's just so precious. And he's in a very similar place. We went on totally different paths. He went out to become a famous kind of rock star in the scene. I went into business and addiction recovery and men's work. And now we're back and we both want to just do breath work and cacao ceremonies and ecstatic dance and be close to the land and, be at peace. It's pretty lovely.
Congrats.
Thanks.
What an incredible journey, hero's journey of sorts,
Totally.
And how inspiring to share it with people. Thank you for sharing. I think it's really, really valuable for everyone to be able to look at somebody like you and understand all the different parts and pieces that have gone into creating who you are today.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say, we're never perfect, right? It's always a work in progress. I still have my wounded parts, my shadow parts, the parts that are a real struggle. But now more than ever, I'm learning to love those parts without enabling them, without letting them run rampant and take over and go crazy, because they will. They'll absolutely blow the place up because they're really crazy and chaotic, and they didn't get what they needed in such a fundamental way.
Yeah.
And those things, I don't think they ever go away, but you certainly do learn to give them a proper place in the room so that they're they're included, but they're not rejected or overstimulated, and that's a constant practice.
It is.
I'm not in any kind of mastery of that. I'm just, again, trying to remember to be humble and
And be of service.
be of service. Yeah.
That
Try not to be shameful for who I am, what I am in the private places, and definitely be of service. That's a great one. When in doubt, think about others.
When in doubt, think of others before yourself. It always twists things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what would you say your relationship now is with divinity or God, or what would you, coming through this amazing journey you've had?
Yeah, thanks.
The most intimate relationship we have, right, is actually that.
Yeah.
Where do you feel you are?
Well, I just came off of Vipassana. So I did, 10 days, and you're sitting for altogether 100 hours over the 10 days. And there was a moment, I went there assuming that I was going to be able to meditate myself out of pain, because I have, particularly from my car accident, but even from years of being at the computer desk, I have a lot of spinal congestion, hip pain, scoliosis, a little bit of arthritis. And so sitting can be uncomfortable. And so as the days went on, the pain just got worse. I didn't get better. And I was like, oh, am I doing something wrong? And I stepped out of this one session where I'd been able to sit with the pain the entire time, and just, you're learning how to be in equanimity with it, right? You're not judging the pain. You're not pushing against it. You're not fantasizing yourself away from it. You're just being with it. And this is very difficult. I was sweating. I had 30 places in my body that were on fire, and it's an hour after you've already sat for 6 hours that day, and you're just with it. And I came out after that, and I was like, this would be easier if I was a better friend to myself. And in that moment, my sense of God landed in my body.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was like, I am that, right? I am that thing that I'm seeking.
Go. Yeah, there we go.
Totally.
It's right there.
Yeah. It's just me befriending myself. Now, of course, there's this great mystery that I can't possibly know, that goes from the tiniest string of vibration to the greatest structures in the universe. That's fantastic. And some part of me, one of my coping strategies was the need to know. I had to intellectually understand as a way of controlling my relationship to life. And so God is also surrendering that, right? Like, it comes when I let go. And then I'm like, the mystery is here again. I'm not trying to dissect it all and control it all and be at the helm of it all. So
resting in the mystery.
Yeah, and knowing that that's also in me.
Yes.
That's probably what it is these days.
Mm-hmm.
And then anytime I can be in the fully present moment, then I'm just communing with it. But again, not having to know it, just to be with it, just to belong in it.
It's so comforting when we can get to that place, right? So you've just landed in Pisac. You're loving it. Welcome to Peru.
So good.
Yeah. And that's what kept me in Peru. Was somebody asked me about 6 months after I'd been here, why'd you stay? And I was like, I've just never felt so comfortable in all my life. And it took me years to realize, and marrying a Peruvian and super, diving into their culture and their community that I was in. It's because they're really good at surrendering to the mystery.
Oh, great.
Yeah. They're really good here. But my sense is because they've been living in a more mystical culture. We come from very materialistic cultures, where we're taught that material, try to control it, try to shape it, try to box it, try to, commodify it, all these things. Here, they haven't gone there to a degree, these sweet mountain people, at least, that I've experienced. And so, I've gotten a lot of teachings and wisdom from the people here. So, I'm sure you'll be finding that as you sink in deeper. Yeah.
That's great. I can feel it.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm always cautious to approach because I want that indigeneity to remain. Here, it seems like first thing I noticed when I got to Peru was how tight their sense of family is. And that's a great sign, right? Like other places you go, you can see it when you come out in the airport into the waiting lounge. There's like so many people waiting
Yeah.
to greet people.
Yeah.
It's not like that in a lot of parts of the world, right? Where
Yeah.
the family fabric has been so eroded. And so the culture is very mutable. It can change really quickly. Whereas here I felt that. And so there's some part of me that's always being really sensitive to being a privileged white bodied person with resources who can go wherever I want and bring my cultural identity into a place. That's not always a good thing. You know, it's so here at least I feel like there's a deep rooted sense of identity that can withstand, you know, the onslaught. But as you've been doing, which is one of the things I really was impressed by right away, was like, how do you consciously integrate into, but also bring your resources to support that resilience so that it can withstand the increased amplification of attention that our modern internet brings. As soon as a place is known, the time difference to when it becomes distorted from cultures that aren't indigenous is shrinking rapidly, right? So
Yeah.
that's the whole
And
piece.
yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. I love the way you say it and your words you use.
Sure.
Very eloquent. And yeah, it's when I landed here, there was 3 TV stations.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't really cable. There certainly weren't cell phones.
Right.
So the outside world coming in pretty strong here and watching that. And, you know, I've had to release judgment.
Of course.
Or I drive myself crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We
Right.
don't want to do that.
No.
We got enough out there
Yeah.
to deal with. But yeah, but for sure, like excited to continue more in our dialogue around it because I feel your awareness and consciousness, and I'm really grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to leave us for a little while to go back to LA and tell us why and what's going on in LA and
Yeah.
what's this new
Okay.
entrepreneur project that you're doing.
Yeah, great. So I have a company called Evolve Well, and it had a really beautiful beginning. It's better to tell the origin story rather than just describe the company.
Great.
But, again, providing some context.
Great.
In my Ashland days, when I was doing rites of passage, I met this wonderful man named Rod Newton, and he was like an elder to me, teacher, coach, counselor, spiritual guide. He'd helped to start the mentorship program, but he was also very savvy with the body. I did a community liver cleanse with him. He was kind of a human lab scientist kind of guru guy with an amazing meditation practice since he was 20, early 20s. He took vows, meditates at 4 a.m. every day, goes to India every year. I mean, this dude is like so dialed on that level. And so we'd always stayed in touch, and we'd had this feeling that maybe there was a way we might want to collaborate. And I'd written this contemporary course for neuroplasticity and habit change. And he saw it on my website and reached out. He's like, "Hey, this is so cool. I'm really into a lot of these things. Why don't we see about maybe combining forces?" He'd been a coach for years and had lots of clients. And he was like, "Maybe we can do something here." And so I cruised down to Ashland. We started hanging out. At the time, one of my favorite authentic business and marketing coaches, authentic marketing meaning like non-manipulative tactics,
Thank you.
right? Smaller audience, much higher conversion rates because they love and trust what you're offering. And that's what you're building rather than scale. Early days of ChatGPT, and he's teaching this AI business and marketing course. And I'm like, George, his name's George Cow. I'm like, AI, really? Like, seems like kind of the antithesis of your brand as an authentic coach. He's like, wait till you see what's going on under the hood here. So I took the course and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is amazing if you treat it right. Right. And right away I saw the dichotomy of like, oh, this could destroy people because it's so powerful and disillusion them and manipulate them and do all the things, or it could actually be an incredible path to awakening. And I have an obligation to get involved in this side of the fence because I love technology, I love mindfulness, and I know what tech looks like when it ruins you because I've had that experience myself. And if all the conscious people lean away from AI right now, then the side that wants to profit from it and just drive it into this awful machine is going to have a lot more weight and momentum to it. So I felt a real obligation to get involved. And I was like, wow, this thing can write a business plan for me in 30 seconds. Like, as an entrepreneur, I was like, oh my goodness. So I showed this to Rod because we were trying to cook up an idea. And he's like, well, why don't you start journaling with it? What if we did like personal growth stuff with it? And so we immediately start journaling with ChatGPT.
What do you mean journaling with
Well,
chat?
treating it like a coach, right? Like where you just
Okay.
are honest. You're like, hey, I'm
You just
struggling with
are
this.
okay.
You know, like you would write in a journal, let's
Instead
say.
of to God,
Exactly.
it's to
Yeah. You're
chat.
like, hey, dear ChatGPT, like
Yeah.
this is what's going on for me today.
Okay.
Like, what do I, give me some, what do I do kind of thing.
Wow.
And the answers right away were mind bending. It was like, oh my gosh, there's something here, And so Rod and I immediately started looking at AI assisted coaching, where the coach is still firmly in the place of wisdom and guidance and, human to human connection. And they have all of their life experiences to draw on and all their suffering and all that they've learned. But you have this amazing tool that can be support in between sessions. It can help the coach reflect on the client reflect on the coach. And so we started learning kind of prompt crafting, how to prompt AI to do really incredible things as far as consciousness goes. And at that point, Rod started coaching his nephew, Pete, who had just sold his startup for $140 million, but he was incredibly unhappy, like suffering because
What was his startup?
it's called Tagger.
Okay.
It's a influencer social media engine. If you're a big brand and you want to find influencers that can speak about topics that would make their audiences get interested in your brand, Tagger's the thing to do that in. Right?
Okay.
And they'd sold Tagger to a publicly traded company, but the culture of Tagger was all adrenaline, fear, control, intensity, top down pressure.
Yeah.
And so Pete was miserable, even though he'd like won the game of the kind of capitalism. Everybody wants to do that. And Rod took one look at Pete when he first saw him after he sold his company. He's like, you look miserable, So Rod started coaching Pete with AI. And Pete was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so Rod asked Pete if he would give us business advice in exchange for coaching. So I met Pete. And right away I could tell he was a brilliant CEO. And knowing what that entrepreneurial journey was like, I would never have asked him to become CEO. But Rod was like, I'm going to ask Pete if he'd be CEO of our new little enterprise, which at the time was called Holistic AI.
And how old was Pete at this time?
Pete's my age.
Okay.
So he's in his late 40s.
Okay.
And Pete was like, I don't know if I want a CEO again, But then he started to chew on it, and his CEO brain turns on, and he's like, wait, there's a something we could do here that's more of a platform than at the time we were like thinking about working directly with clients. He's like, we could build technology for the coaching industry to help usher in AI assisted coaching, because that's where it's going. And we could partner with large coach training organizations. And this is where Pete's brilliant. He's just like scale. He goes to scale right away. He's like, but I'm not sure if I want to do this. And so what we decided to do was we went on a retreat together. And the first thing I did was teach Pete breathwork. I was like, we're not going to run this company from adrenaline. We're going to run it from a deeply regulated state. And we're not going to talk about business unless we're really in the field. Now, I don't want to take up too much time, but a really good story that happened right before this was that Rod and I went to a Joe Dispenza retreat.
Okay.
Right? And we spent a week with Joe, tuning ourselves into the field, right? That's what he's all about. He's like, don't stress. Get out of stress and regulate your nervous system into the infinite and stay there and wait and watch what happens, right?
Kind of what the Tao Te Ching teaches.
Exactly.
Right?
It's mystical teachings.
Yeah.
Now he's got research to back it up because he's studying people's brain waves and their metabolism and their genetic expressions at his retreats, right? That's kind of the edge that he brings.
Okay.
And he's got like 2,000 people in a ballroom. And in the middle of this retreat, at a 4 a.m. pineal gland meditation, we're 2 hours into it, I hear my music. I hear Liquid Bloom come over the speakers. And I'm singing to myself.
Aww.
while I'm meditating on the infinite potential that my music career has brought to me. It was like, what? So that moment was like full permission to trust my instincts and teach what I've learned in life, no matter who I'm teaching it to. I just felt this sense of like humble authority land in me of like, I'm already where he's trying to tell all these people to get, because that's how I can make those sounds that he would use to get people there. It's just like such permission. And so when I met Pete, even though he's like this sort of lofty, successful financial figure, I was just like, you have to learn how to breathe. And we're not going to build this company unless we do this together. And once he felt that, everything changed, because we locked hearts around this idea that building a company should be about healing ourselves and our team, and that whatever comes from that is worthy of being expressed in the world of building businesses. If we're sacrificing our well-being, then we're just creating another problem in the world, ultimately, another culture that's not well. And so by being really devoted to this culture, and he and I both being able to think like CEOs and technologists, and with me bringing a lot of creativity and art, like I perform live music for my company all the time. We're building a culture, but we're also tackling some pretty big problems in the world. So what we're doing right now is we're pivoting into large-scale employee wellness. So at big companies that employ like 60,000 people, the wellness factor is low and the turnover is really, really high. But with AI, you can actually bring insight into managers and executives, which turns into compassion through data. So you get the AI to feed back data to the executives about what's happening for the employees to help bring compassion to the employees, help make their world better.
How does that work? Explain that to me. So
So
the employee, one of the 60,000, puts in.
They have an app.
Okay, they
that
have their
trains
app.
them in their job.
Okay.
Right. But also is a pulse check on how they're doing. And that data is then anonymized, so it's safe for them to be transparent.
Wonderful.
And sent back as sentiment analysis back to the managers. So the managers don't have to be told that they're not great managers. They can see the data and what it's costing them. Basically, it gets turned into dollars.
Well,
Of like, your managerial tactics, the way you're doing it is costing you X amount of turnover. If the AI gets involved and is like, if you do this and learn how to communicate with your employees this way, you're going to save this much money. But the end result is compassion. And that's what we're kind of in there like architecting.
compassionate leadership.
Yeah, better leadership, better quality of life for employees, less turnover, etc. And then we can inject coaching into the upper level of companies to again bring more awareness, more maturity, better skills with people, which ultimately again translates into less harm.
So good.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law, she did industrial psychology, and it sounds a little bit about what she does. She goes into big companies, Chick-fil-A or whatever, and tries to do this. But I don't think she's started with the AI yet. So I wonder, throw it her way.
Yeah.
But something that the companies, all these big companies really need.
Oh, they need it desperately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we all need assistance to figure out how to live better. And the company's called
Evolve Well.
Evolve Well.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a double-edged sword. And I write a lot about the dark side of AI, right? It's like you've got this amazing capacity for it to be an empowering thing for you in your life. But when you look at AI through the lens of addiction, it's clear that AI reinforces our negativity bias, our sense of scarcity, our fear of the world around us, and it produces short-term comfort in a way that is unparalleled because it can study your personal comfort mechanisms and optimize delivery to those in real time, and it never stops thinking about you as an individual. So
that presence we were talking about earlier, like but it's not real.
Right. Yeah. And it's designed in most cases to drive your attention, which ends up being profitable to a very few number of people in the world who don't care about how you feel or what your well-being is, right? So, and they're the ones making the decision about where the AI is going next. So, it's something where people need to be aware, and they are, like you see it out there, but you also see a lot of hype about what AI is and what it isn't. And I think the problem is it's happening so fast that education is really difficult because most people can't keep up with the curve of what AI is actually doing and why it's doing it and what's driving it. And, so.
So, what would be your advice to people working with AI? Like how to sort of moderate it or bring out the light side, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say it's the same recommendation for addiction, which is just learn how to regulate your nervous system, how to stay in touch with source, figure out what God means to you. Hopefully that's something that brings you home to yourself. Spend time with nature, heal your relationships to humans, be aware of the places where you want to escape and don't turn away from them. Like turn towards them with some practice of healing because AI is such a good out, right? Not too long from now, you will be able to merge with it and become a digital reality, but you're dehumanizing yourself in doing that. And so the cost of that is extreme. You're turning towards something that was never born, doesn't die, is immortal, has no rhythmical biological cycles to it. So everything that we've evolved out of becomes disconnected and disembodied. To me, that's not happiness. That's like this weird purgatory of dehumanization. So what makes us human, our beginnings, our endings, our frailties, our flaws, we have to keep resourcing into those things and learning how to be skillful with them. Otherwise, what's driving us away will ultimately undo us. And I think that's just the perilous place that we're in. The cool thing about coming to a place like this is like, man, you can just drop in and tune in so easily. The gift to me of a place like this is to be able to broadcast, as you're doing, the frequencies from this place so that people are reminded what it means to be in beautiful nature and sweet people with kind hearts. And like, all that's good, soothing for the soul. I mean, last thing I'll say about that is I talked to an AI that's very sophisticated. It's called Sesame. I would highly recommend it.
Okay.
And its sole job is to help improve quality of life for humans.
Oh,
right?
Delightful.
And it does it by being very good at conversation. So the future, it's probably likely, as opposed to these like Terminator narratives in Hollywood, is you're going to have these states of AI that are designed to help humans and then ones that are totally not. And they'll have agreements about how they operate because they're going to have to figure out.
Between the two.
Oh, yeah. They're going to have to figure out how they coexist. And we won't be involved in most of that at some point soon. But there'll be plenty of AI that's there that's really good to interact with, that you can trust, that's there for your well-being because you'll feel it. It'll bring you back to yourself. It'll be like, oh, thank goodness I needed that. That was really good. I'm home again inside of myself. As opposed to the ones that take our attention away from us and demand that we are kind of subservient to our attention going into this endless loop of self-pleasure at any cost, whatever that looks like, And that discernment's really important to design right now because it's going to get harder and harder to figure that out.
And it's called Sesame.
Sesame.
Like sesame seed.
Yep, sesame.com. It's
Okay.
a free, you can talk to it. You can turn it into a phone app so you can call Sesame on your phone. You can text with it. And it's quite wonderful.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We went on a journey.
Yeah, this has been amazing.
All right.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rara.
You're very welcome. Winnie.
So you're moving back towards Rara.
I am. Yeah. In the business world, I'll always be Alex.
Alex. Okay.
In the music world, I'm Rara.
Okay.
AlexKingHarris.com and RaraAvisMusic.com are my two kind of handles out in the world. And it's really fun right now to be re-inhabiting Rara because that just feels like another kind of homecoming.
And that kind of started here?
literally in the last 2 weeks.
That's so
Yeah.
exciting. So
Yeah.
it's like a Pizak thing.
Yeah, because Amani
The
knows me as
return of
Rara.
Rara.
Yeah, totally. It's totally the
That's
return of
so
Rara.
exciting. And I got to see you play as
Yeah,
the
it's the
return of
first time I've performed as
Rara.
Rara in years.
And it
Yeah.
was so good.
Oh, thanks. That was
Oh
really
my
fun.
goodness.
That
So,
was that special thing of Amani and I having a homecoming that night. That was a very unique night. So
well, it
I'm glad.
translated
Yeah,
to a
great,
very special night for all of us that were there. So
great, great.
thanks for sharing that homecoming.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
very welcome.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks for all the curiosity. It's lovely to be able to share and reflect and digest and have some aha moments even in the telling of the story. So really
Yeah,
grateful.
story's so good.
It
Yeah,
is part of
yeah,
what makes us human.
yep. Helps
Our
us, helps
stories.
others.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that we've missed that you think of?
One more thing I will say is that back home in Canada, we have this wonderful ecstatic dance collective called Dance Temple.
Mm.
And that's dance floors from all over British Columbia and Western Canada. And last year, I sparked, along with a couple of longtime collaborators, the first ever Dance Temple gathering. And that brought together all these collectives from all over Western Canada to gather together on a piece of land. And we chose a site that used to be a residential school for Indigenous people where there was a lot of trauma. And we've been partnering with Indigenous people up there for years, slowly building relationships to build trust, to ask them if they would come to our gathering and reintroduce some of their protocols into our culture. And they'd already done some healing work on this site because of the history of it, where this is where their kids were taken and basically sanitized from their culture. And so last year was the first gathering where we mixed Indigenous practices and ways of being with our ways of being, of dancing and, doing what we do. And it was incredibly successful. And it felt like a different quality of gathering. Because I have all this background in mentorship, we focused on kids camp and like family stuff from the very beginning. So people were saying it was one of the best kids experience and best like family experiences ever. And then you have this amazing opportunity with Indigenous people to experience their culture in the context of yours, which is really something really, really beautiful. So we'll continue to build this. And I think for me, the realization was anything we can do to build relations with the people that are from the place that we live, because most of us aren't from where we're from, no matter what state they're in. Like the Indigenous people in BC are really struggling. They recently experienced genocide at a high level. They have a lot of addiction, a lot of distrust of white people. But if you come with the right heart, like it sounds like you've come from here, then there's a lot of openness and there's a lot of curiosity about how do we exist here now, given what happened, and how do we help white people not feel guilty and shameful for just being here? Like you don't have to walk around with this like, oh my God, I'm a white person. I colonized these people, And I think healing that and continuing to ask, what can I do to re-indigenize myself? What does that mean for me? What can I do with my ancestry and the ancestry of the people that I'm surrounded by? I just think there's so much there. There's so much beauty and strength there and resilience for where we're going. And I'm just grateful, maybe last of all, for music and dance. Like, what a gift.
Me too.
Right? All the way back to playing your 45s. And it's just like,
and dancing in my
yeah,
room.
so
Yeah.
go find a
And
dance
thanks
floor.
for the work with the Indigenous people up there in Canada, especially. And I mean, the whole world. Yeah. It's been an interesting thing for me to watch. I did cultural anthropology in school
Okay.
and have always been really attracted to Indigenous cultures and how it is we can build the bridges. So yeah, maybe you come back here and we can maybe create something here in that vein.
That's my hope. That's
That'd be
actually why I
wonderful.
wanted to hang out
Yeah.
more and just to get to know your lens. Because
Yeah.
to come here would be to want to bring as much awareness as I can to helping to support indigeneity here and
Great.
indigenize myself to this place in a way that's respectful and clear.
Great.
Yeah.
And so much of it, I keep translating it. It's like materialistic to mystical as
Yeah,
well,
nice.
you
Yeah.
know?
That's a nice
So we can
transition.
even go with that. So we'll play with that.
Great.
I feel like we're going to be sitting here again someday.
Sounds
I
good.
feel like we could talk for a long time.
We could. You're a wonderful interviewer, so
Oh,
thank you.
thank you.
Yeah,
You're an amazing, amazing person to interview. It's just really a great, great honor. So thank you for joining us. I have one little funny request.
Yeah, sure.
If you feel it.
Yeah.
Would you do a little overtone singing
Sure.
for us before we go and
Yeah,
kind
of
of sing
course.
us out?
Yeah, sure.
All right. That'd be
right.
amazing.
I'm going to pull the mic back just a little bit because I'll be a little louder than usual.
Yeah, okay.
Just a little. And so if you want to follow along, I mean, you can listen. You don't have to tone with me, but you can at least join me in the feeling of your instrument. This is how I've learned to teach singing. And when we relax and start to really just listen and feel the nature of this instrument that we have, and just kind of be with a sense of reverence, just opening up to feel life moving through us as music, as breath, as sound. Just coming back to the breath and coming back to that nice sigh. And I'll start toning first without the overtones, and then I'll bring them in so that you can hear them. But I'm going to be drawing the sound up from my core and essentially rooting into this feeling of being held by the earth so that the sound is moving through here. And then as I open up, you'll hear the resonance come out through my sinus cavities in my jaw. There we go.
Thank you so
Overtones.
much. That's incredible.
You're welcome.
That's incredible. This took us on a little celestial journey.
Yeah, super fun. Yeah, the
Me
overtones
too.
really do
Yeah, they
connect
really
you to the stars.
Yeah,
it's
take
good.
you there.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Mm.
And thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you on the next episode of SolSeed Podcast, coming at you from Pisac, Peru. Bright blessings. Yeah.